The devil. Ivan's nightmare. I am not a doctor. Anticipating events, I can say at least one thing. He was at that moment on the very eve of an attack of brain fever. Though his health had long been affected, it had offered a stubborn resistance to the fever, which in the end gained complete mastery over it. Though I know nothing of medicine, I venture to hazard the suggestion that he really had perhaps, by a terrible effort of will, succeeded in delaying the attack for a time, hoping, of course, to check it completely. He knew that he was unwell. After listening to him and examining him, the doctor came to the conclusion that he was actually suffering from some disorder of the brain, and was not at all surprised by an admission which Ivan had reluctantly made him. Hallucinations are quite likely in your condition, the doctor opined, though it would be better to verify them. But Ivan did not follow this judicious advice, and did not take to his bed to be nursed. I am walking about. And so he was sitting almost conscious himself of his delirium, and, as I have said already, looking persistently at some object on the sofa against the opposite wall. Some one appeared to be sitting there, though goodness knows how he had come in, for he had not been in the room when Ivan came into it on his return from Smerdyakov. This was a person, or, more accurately speaking, a Russian gentleman of a particular kind, no longer young, equifaciate la cinquantaine, as the French say, with rather long, still thick, dark hair, slightly streaked with grey, and a small pointed beard. He was wearing a brownish reefer jacket. His linen and his long scarf-like necktie were all such as are worn by people who aim at being stylish, but on closer inspection his linen was not over clean, and his wide scarf was very threadbare. The visitor's check trousers were of excellent cut, but were too light in color and too tight for the present fashion. His soft, fluffy white hat was out of keeping with the season. In brief, there was every appearance of gentility on straitened means. It looked as though the gentleman belonged to that class of idle landowners who used to flourish in the times of serfdom. He had unmistakably been, at some time, in good and fashionable society, had once had good connections, had possibly preserved them indeed, but, after a gay youth, such gentlemen of accommodating temper and dependent position, sometimes they have children, but if so, the children are always being brought up at a distance, at some aunt's to whom these gentlemen never allude in good society, they gradually lose sight of their children altogether, though at intervals they receive a birthday or Christmas letter from them, and sometimes even answer it. The countenance of the unexpected visitor was not so much good-natured as accommodating and ready to assume any amiable expression as occasion might arise. He had no watch, but he had a tortoise-shell lorgnette on a black ribbon. On the middle finger of his right hand was a massive gold ring with a cheap opal stone in it. Ivan was angrily silent, and would not begin the conversation. The visitor waited, and sat exactly like a poor relation who had come down from his room to keep his host company at tea, and was discreetly silent, seeing that his host was frowning and preoccupied. But he was ready for any affable conversation as soon as his host should begin it. All at once his face expressed a sudden solicitude. "I say," he began to Ivan, "excuse me, I only mention it to remind you, you went to Smerdyakov's to find out about Katerina Ivanovna." "Yes, I'd forgotten. I seem to be delirious." "I am so glad you treat me so familiarly," the visitor began. "Fool," laughed Ivan, "do you suppose I should stand on ceremony with you? I am in good spirits now, though I've a pain in my forehead." "You are a lie, you are my illness, you are a phantom. It's only that I don't know how to destroy you, and I see I must suffer for a time." "Yes, that was a moment of weakness." Ivan laughed again. "You scold me, but you laugh at's a good sign. I understand, qu'est noble, c'est charmant. You are going to defend your brother and to sacrifice yourself. You choose out only my worst thoughts, and what's more, the stupid ones." Ivan said through his clenched teeth, "My dear friend, above all things I want to behave like a gentleman and to be recognized as such. I am poor, but—" Ivan snapped out. But you are clever anyway. You keep saying the same thing, but I had such an attack of rheumatism last year that I remember it to this day." Ivan stopped suddenly, seeming struck. "That never entered my head. That's strange," Ivan exclaimed almost in despair. He ceased walking to and fro, sat down on the sofa, leaned his elbows on the table again, and held his head tight in both hands. He pulled the wet towel off and flung it away in vexation. It was evidently of no use. "Your nerves are out of order," observed the gentleman, with a carelessly easy, though perfectly polite, air. "You are angry with me even for being able to catch cold, though it happened in a most natural way. I was hurrying then to a diplomatic soyer at the house of a lady of high rank in Petersburg," Ivan interrupted, carelessly and disdainfully. He was exerting himself to the utmost not to believe in the delusion and not to sink into complete insanity. "An axe," the guest interrupted in surprise. "Yes, what would become of an axe there?" Ivan cried suddenly, with a sort of savage and insistent obstinacy. "What would become of an axe in space? Equalid, if it were to fall to any distance, it would begin, I think, flying round the earth without knowing why, like a satellite. The astronomers would calculate the rising and the setting of the axe, a Gatsik would put it in his calendar. Fib more cleverly, or I won't listen." Ivan snarled malignantly. "God preserve me from it, but one can't help complaining sometimes. I am a slandered man. What can I say, if it is? If you are in earnest, is there a God or not?" Ivan cried with the same savage intensity. "Ah, then you are in earnest. My dear fellow, upon my word I don't know, brother. I've said it now, you don't know, but you see God, no, you are not some one apart. There is an anecdote precisely on our subject, or rather a legend, not an anecdote. What tortures? Ah, don't ask. In old days we had all sorts, but now they have taken chiefly to moral punishments of stings of conscience and all that nonsense." Now he was listening with an unexpected curiosity. "Well, is he lying there now? That's the point, that he isn't. Does it make any difference whether he lies there for ever or walks the quadrillion kilometers? It would take 1 billion years to walk it," Ivan cried, with an almost childish delight, as though he had succeeded in remembering something at last. "That anecdote about the quadrillion years I made up myself, but I should like to believe in you. Ha ha, there's an admission, but I am good-natured. I'll come to your assistance again. Listen, it was I caught you, not you me. I told you your anecdote you'd forgotten, on purpose, so as to destroy your faith in me completely. You are lying." "My dear friend, I only wanted to amuse you, but I swear that's the genuine Jesuit casuistry, and I swear that it all happened word for word as I've told you. It happened lately and gave me a great deal of trouble. I am bored with you, agonizingly and insufferably. I would give anything to be able to shake you off. I repeat, moderate your expectations. Don't demand of me everything great and nobles, and you'll see how well we shall get on," said the gentleman impressively. "You are really angry with me for not having appeared to you in a red glow. All my stupid idish outgrown, thrashed out long ago, and flung aside like a dead Carcassio present to me as something new. There's no pleasing you, and I thought I should fascinate you by my literary style. And the ideological cataclysm," the voice continued. "The question now is, my young thinker reflected, is it possible that such a period will ever come? If it does, everything is determined, and humanity is settled for ever." But he did not succeed in finishing. Ivan suddenly snatched a glass from the table and flung it at the orator. "Ah, may say bite Enfin," cried the latter, jumping up from the sofa, and shaking the drops of tea off himself. "He remembers Luther's inkstand. He takes me for a dream and throws glasses at a dream. It's like a woman. I suspected you were only pretending to stop up your ears." A loud, persistent knocking was suddenly heard at the window. Ivan jumped up from the sofa. "Do you hear? You'd better open," cried the visitor. "It's your brother Alyosha, with the most interesting and surprising news, I'll be bound." "Be silent, deceiver! I knew it was Alyosha. I felt he was coming. And of course he has not come for nothing, of course he brings news," Ivan exclaimed frantically. "Open, open to him. There's a snowstorm, and he is your brother." Ivan wanted to rush to the window. He strained every effort to break his chains, but in vain. The knocking at the window grew louder and louder. At last the chains were broken, and Ivan leapt up from the sofa. He looked round him wildly. Both candles had almost burnt out. The glass he had just thrown at his visitor stood before him on the table. The knocking on the window frame went on persistently, but it was by no means so loud as it had seemed in his dream; on the contrary, it was quite subdued. "It was not a dream, no, I swear it was not a dream. It all happened just now," cried Ivan. He rushed to the window and opened the movable pane. "Alyosha, I told you not to come," he cried fiercely to his brother. "In 2 words, what do you want? In 2 words, do you hear? An hour ago Smerdyakov hanged himself," Alyosha answered from the yard. "Come round to the steps, I'll open at once," said Ivan, going to open the door to Alyosha.